So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of IWIL Week, Digital Makes a Difference. I'm Joel Meekison. I've been an IWIL ambassador since 2018, and I'm really passionate about youth advocacy in Scotland and have done lots of work. And I'm really looking forward to learning from our speakers today, some of their insights about operating youth work and how to kind of champion youth voice in the very unprecedented age in which we live in. And kind of apologies and condolences if you're coming to us from one of the events, which one of the areas which has recently been put into section 4 of an only you can now shop at food shops. But welcome, just a bit of housekeeping before we go on to outline the speakers, which we have a fantastic array and packed session for you. We're going to be having 4 speakers from you today. One section is going to be co-chaired by 4 different individuals. If everyone throughout the meeting could keep their audio on mute, that would be great. Feel free though to put on your camera. If you have any technical problems or questions, post in the chat box. We are having support from YouthLink Scotland on that. Feel free throughout to put any thoughts or do some networking in the chat box, absolutely fine. Just to note that we are recording this session this morning, so we hope that that is all right with you, and it is just to keep the thoughts and learnings that we do. And really then, what is this session to achieve? Well, 3 things. Firstly, to share stories of how young people continue to take action and make a difference during COVID. Secondly, to explore the challenges of campaigning for important issues and voices that need to be heard when face-to-face opportunities can't be taking place. And thirdly, to inspire you to join the IWIL movement. I'm biased, but I think it's really important and makes a big difference here in Scotland. To our speakers then, we have 4. First, Katie Horsburgh, who is going to be talking about her work on digital, using digital as a way to champion her work with girls and women here in Scotland. Zoe Anderson from the International Justice Mission. Then Maria McGoldrick, which is one of the Children's Commissioner's Youth Advisors, and then 4 presenters from DUMFRIES and Galloway made up of youth and youth workers. But to our first speaker then, Katie. Katie will share her involvement in the First Minister's Advisory Council on Women and Girls. She is a guide leader, having been a member of Guiding since Brownies, and also sits on the First Minister's National Advisory Council for Women and Girls on behalf of Guiding Scotland. Over the summer, Katie did some virtual research with young people using zine techniques to explore what intersectional gender architecture in Scotland could look like. And she will explore this in her talk today. Take it away, Katie.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to quickly share my screen and then we can get started. Hopefully, can you all see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yep, cool. So hi everyone, thanks so much for having me along today. I'm really excited to be here and to learn from what everyone else has to say about digital youth work. It's been a very weird year, I think we can all agree, but I think we've got a lot to learn from the pandemic and definitely some youth work practices that we can take beyond this very crazy time. Hopefully going to try and keep it quite short, but I'm not very good at that. So we'll see how much time we have for questions at the end. So I'm here today in my capacity as a member of the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, which I sit on behalf of Girl Guiding Scotland. I'm going to start by playing a little video that explains a bit about what the council is and what we do. Apologies if this is really loud. If you've got headphones in, this is your warning.
For generations, our history has been written by one gender, one perspective, one vision, one half of the population. Half of history is missing. For years, we've been striving for change, but now is the time to change for good. To design a future where gender inequality is a historical curiosity. With the voices of everyone, we want to create a Scotland where we're all equal, with an equal future. Together, we are Generation Equal. Generation Equal is made up of 3 powerful circles of people. The first is the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, made up of 16 dedicated women and girls. The second is the Circle, made up of over 530 passionate organisations and campaigners. The third is the people in Scotland who want to make a stand on gender inequality. Have your say at #GenerationEqual.
So yeah, that's us. The Advisory Council's vision is of a Scotland which is recognised internationally as a leader for its commitment and action to realising an equal society, where all women and girls can reach their true potential. Over our 3 years, we focused on 3 key topics, which you can see on the screen: attitudes and culture change, policy coherence, and creating an intersectional gender architecture. In 2020, the Advisory Council is focusing on the topic of creating an intersectional gender architecture. Intersectionality means recognising the interconnection of social identities such as gender, race, and sexuality, and the multiple and overlapping discriminations these can impose on women and girls. Due to the pandemic, the Advisory Council have moved to a completely digital strategy. This means all of our engagement, including participation with our circle of over 1,200 people, and on our annual topic, has been taken forward online. We have also targeted young people directly when exploring this annual topic, which is what I'm really here to talk about today. Young people have been engaged in the Advisory Council's work since the beginning. We have 3 young members aged 17 to 20, though we were obviously a bit younger when we started. Young people have always been welcome at our main meetings, but we wanted even younger voices to be heard. So we formed the Youth Circle to engage with teenagers and hear what they think about gender policy. The aim of the Youth Circle is to inform the Advisory Council's report to the First Minister. We enlisted the help of Lou Brodie, a creative whiz and amazing project manager, who helped us to create an arts-based programme for our youth events. However, when the dreaded virus hit, we had to rethink how we could engage with young people. Once again, I reached out to Lou for help, and we worked together to create a 6-week programme of online engagement, exploring what an intersectional gender architecture in Scotland could look like. I was really keen to use zine techniques in our research. I found out about zines a few years ago, and I've seen them used in a lot of different feminist spaces. I like making them, and I've even used them at guide meetings in the past. I'm a big fan. I like them because they're fun, they're accessible, and by cutting up and sticking media like magazines together, young people can reconstruct dominant narratives in a very hands-on way, which I think is super powerful. They work really well in person and online, and their power comes from the final result, but also equally from the process and the conversations that happen while they're being made. We had 41 young people aged 14 to 19 from 11 organisations, including Girl Guiding Scotland, Lanarkshire Rape Crisis, and Stirling Netball Club, who attended with a supporting youth worker. The young people explored the topic and questions before each creating 1 page of the zine, which were all put together to create a collaborative zine of all their ideas, which they're all, of course, going to get a print copy of. In previous years, our youth events have just been a few hours long, which made it challenging for young people to engage in our topics because they're quite complicated. Being online meant that we had 1 hour a week for 5 weeks, giving us time to really sink our teeth into the topic, break down the Advisory Council questions and explore the answers. The longer engagement also meant we could take data from the journey of conversations, which we followed over the engagement. These conversations were so rich and completely fascinating. Another advantage of being online was that more young people could join us. We even had people from Wick and the Isle of Harris, which definitely wouldn't have been possible face-to-face, which shows how having online youth work during the pandemic has really broken down those geographical barriers that we have in Scotland. There were, of course, challenges as well. Connectivity and access was a concern, with young people dropping off throughout the project. We did have 30 zine pages submitted at the end though, which I think is excellent. One group working with Women's Aid couldn't manage to do a set time every week because life for them was too unpredictable. So we recorded the talks from the live sessions so they could work through the programme in their own time with the support of their youth worker. This is a really good example of the learning we can take into other events, whether they're online or in person, on how we can be even more accessible for young people. I definitely learned a lot from organising a programme like this during the pandemic. We had to balance the fact that while some young people are desperate for things to do, others, are often the more marginalised young people, were under a lot more pressure than ever before. We tried to take a safe and gentle approach so that we didn't make anyone feel overwhelmed. Another challenge was that for many, our topic would probably seem quite far away from the reality of what was happening, even though we know that inequalities were exacerbated by COVID. Many young people will have been living the pandemic and would have struggled to step back and think beyond the end of the crisis. We had to be careful to acknowledge the situation, but not focus on it so much that it became stressful. The pandemic was something to consider within the team as well. I wanted everyone's input on how we should run things, but I also didn't want anyone to feel pressured or overwhelmed during planning. This was quite a tricky balance to strike, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. So, what now? Participants have submitted their zine pages and a graphic designer has compiled them into an amazing newspaper, which the Advisory Council are considering while we write our report and make our recommendations to the First Minister. It's also going to be available in print and online for decision makers, including the First Minister, to read. I can't wait to share with the actual zine with all of you once it's published in January, but you can see on the screen some of the key themes which emerged during our research, such as access to sport, access to childcare, access to maternal health care and media representation. There's also the potential for the consultation process itself to feature in a short report we'll write at the end of our term as an advisory council. It will explore how consulting a diverse range of young people could work, online or in person, and how arts techniques could be used in this. On the surface, a lot of the topics the young people explored were very specific to lived experiences, but they are, of course, indicative of larger structural inequalities. I was very impressed by how maturely and thoughtfully they tackled the topic of intersectionality. By talking to each other and by hearing from guest speakers, they really developed an understanding of how multiple discriminations and barriers can add up. It was a really fun project to do, and we at the Advisory Council got a lot out of it. The young people all commented that they enjoyed it too, and hopefully seemed to learn a lot. So that's my presentation on the digital youth work we did at the Advisory Council over the summer. It was a really fun and worthwhile project, and I hope that what I learned from it was useful for you as well. I'd be really happy to take any questions you have. I think we're doing that at the end. But I'm going to leave the reference list up for a couple of seconds so that you can screenshot it if you're interested in any of the resources, or I'd be happy to share my slides after the session. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Katie. That was really interesting. And I know I have a few questions maybe, but we are going to do them at the end. But if anyone kind of is worried about forgetting them, definitely pop them in the chat box function. Next, we are going to be hearing from Zoe Anderson. Zoe will join us from the International Justice Mission, an anti-slavery organisation passionate about raising a generation of modern abolitionists, to chat about how, while during COVID-19 has inevitably made in-person volunteering difficult, it is an opportunity to better equip and realise young people's ability to be advocates for change in their own ways and within their own spheres of influence. So I think I'll just shut up now and let Zoe take it away.
Thanks so much, Joel. Yeah, as Joel said, I'm Zoe and I work for International Justice Mission, or IJM for short, which is the largest anti-slavery organisation in the world. And I lead our work with youth and students here in Scotland, helping mobilise them to become a generation of modern abolitionists who are determined and passionate to see an end to modern slavery in their lifetime. So just for a bit of context to that, today there are 40 million children, men and women being held in slavery, which is more than ever before, more than throughout the transatlantic slave trade throughout history. And as COVID-19 has caused increased lockdowns, we've inadvertently seen a massive increase in exploitation in many areas in which we work. So the fight hasn't stopped, but the work has had to adapt. And I'm sure all of your different areas of work had to adapt. So today I want to share with you just a bit of an example of how we've adapted that from the perspective of our young people here in Scotland, now that we can no longer run face-to-face opportunities. So this summer we had planned on taking part on an online Christian youth conference called Magnitude. We had these big grand plans to build an escape room, and we were going to give youth the opportunity to go undercover as an IJM investigator to learn what it's like to investigate these crimes, to solve it, and then to journey on the story with one of the children who have been rescued from slavery. And the idea was for young people to encounter these stories, to then be moved to act, either right there and then in signing a petition, or once they've gone home to make a stand, to become a speaker, to run a fundraiser, to different things. And then COVID hit. So we had to rethink how we would help young people encounter these stories, and how we would help young people raise up their voices to be modern abolitionists who are passionate about freedom without events or without an in-person way of doing that. So for us, there were kind of two questions. Firstly, how can we effectively communicate something, such a vast problem, when it's not in person? We've all experienced the Zoom fatigue. And secondly, what can youth tangibly do within the current restrictions? Let me go to the next slide, Hilary. So we ran something called Just Ride to Magnitude. The conference was already online, so we wanted to help still create that sense of camaraderie that you get when you go to a conference together in the minibus, and that even though each of the youth were logging in from their own homes. As I said, Zoom fatigue had already hit, so we were keen to facilitate them getting outside as part of this. So what Just Ride to Magnitude was youth groups from right across Scotland. We had groups in the Orkney Islands, and then we had people, right down from Central Belt across in Skye. It was great. Rally together and then calculate the miles that they would have travelled as a group together to Magnitude if it were in person, and if COVID hadn't hit and they were camping at Lendrick Muir. And then between them, they pledged to cycle these miles as a team within a specific amount of time. So whilst doing this, they set up Just Giving pages, shared graphics and told stories to raise awareness and funds across their spheres of influence. So social media in their families, their friends, their schools, telling the stories of those of the same age who had been previously trapped in violent exploitation and were now living in freedom. And in taking on this challenge, they became modern abolitionists. They were not only just volunteering at an ad hoc event, as which traditional volunteering has often looked like before now, but actually they were moved to raise their own voice in their own sphere of influence, to cycle, to tell stories, to fundraise, and be an advocate in their area. So all of this kind of brought a learning to me that while COVID-19 has inadvertently made it really difficult to do in-person volunteering, that there's actually opportunity to better equip and release youth to be advocates for change in their own ways, within their own unique spheres of influence. And actually in this season, could the main investment be in how we communicated our story to youth, so that from this place, they could tell it in their own way, to their own networks, to their schools, around their dinner tables. So in processing this, my two main top tips from running this campaign, if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great, Hilary. The first is to tell your organization's story in a tangible way. So I was sharing about the thousands of children who were being forced to work in the fishing industry in Ghana. So I found a fishing boat and I told the story from a fishing boat. How can we tell our stories in a tangible way? And secondly, we want to go to the next slide. How can we give them a fun platform to champion youth from? At this point in lockdown, we couldn't gather together in groups. There was real screen fatigue. But one thing we could do is our own daily bit of exercise. So we came up with a cycle challenge and made the challenge tangible and personal to them, the journey that they would have done. And the youth really enjoyed working it all out together and then getting on board together. And then from this point, they could have fun, they could get competitive with one another, all whilst raising their voice, making a stand, raising awareness and raising funds to see an end to slavery. If you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thanks, Elaine. And throughout this process, we gave them a number of top tips as to how to run a successful campaign, but all were just ideas and they really ran with it in different ways. And we ended up having 15 youth groups from across Scotland take on the challenge. And I was really struck that actually that's 15 entire spheres of influence that I previously would have had no connection to. A lot of spheres of influence who maybe had no idea about the 40 million trapped in slavery today. And in us just investing in and equipping those young people, actually, they've become the advocates for change in their areas. We've already seen far increased impact from this year's approach to previous years when we could do in-person events, with new areas reached with our mission and over £4,500 raised between our youth groups. And then some youth groups actually going beyond the challenge and finding their own unique ways to champion the fight to end slavery moving forwards. So I just want to go to this this last slide. I wanted to just read this this email that I got from one of our young people who actually went beyond Just Ride and was just really moved by this work and has started doing lots of different things. And she said, "I've been challenged by all the IGM stories this weekend. And in the past, when I've encountered the organisation before, the stories break my heart and I've decided to challenge myself to run 50 kilometres over August to try and fundraise for IJM. That may not sound like a lot to runners or sporty people, but I really hate running and I'm quite unfit. And since I'm not in school and out of a job for now, I have a lot of free time to be using my body for good. I've started a fundraising page through IGM for those interested." This is a really difficult time for everyone, and including our young people. They're not being able to connect with their friends at school. There's so many different restrictions changing at different points. And I just loved here how this girl had seen through that, seen the opportunity, and literally ran with it. So we can end that PowerPoint there, Hilary. Yeah, so I would just finish in saying that it is a really difficult time for volunteering, but I really believe that there's opportunity in it, and people are thinking local, people are thinking about their own communities. So let's invest in our youth really well to be the voices for change within their own communities and in their own way. Thanks.
Thanks, Zoe. That was really interesting, and something that I haven't actually heard that much about. I mean, that 40 million, totally shocking and not something I'd come across before, actually. So thank you for bringing that along today. Next, we have an interesting contribution from Maria McGoldrick. She is one of the Children's Commissioner's Young Advisors and has presented at the Defence for Children International event on Girls' Human Rights Defenders. Maria also is one of the MSYPs for the Western Isles and will focus on her personal volunteering and how that has changed for better or for worse. I think I like the honesty as it moved online. But again, Maria, please take it away.
Thank you, Joel. I'll just share my screen if I can figure out how.
At the bottom, yeah, have you got it?
Sorry, it's not letting me do it.
Do you need to be a co-host?
I might have to ask Dumfries and Galloway to go next and me send my PowerPoint to Hilary if that's okay. It won't let me do it.
No bother at all. Flexible in the digital online age of working.
That might be the way to go. Yeah, Maria, just pop that as an email to me.
Yeah, no problem.
I shall leave you to sort that as we go on to the youth and youth workers of Dumfries and Galloway. Within 24 hours of the lockdown being announced, Dumfries and Galloway Council's youth work team had devised and launched their fully online youth work offer in partnership with local young people. Wow, can I just say. They have created their digital youth work plan and developed it from live Facebook events to fully digital online youth groups. This presentation today will explore the co-design process, virtual social action, Digital Youth Voice, and Dumfries and Galloway's YOUTHWORK team will share their experiences of developing a digital opportunity that makes a difference. And I think that's really interesting. So we're going to hear from Lauren Asher, an Online and Communications Youth Information Officer, Hannah Bayers, MSYP for Galloway and West Dumfries, Connor Johnson, who's a youth counsellor for young people with additional support needs and disabilities, and Erin Blair, a digital peer educator and youth work services youth young leader. So please take it away, all four of you.
Hello, thank you very much. I will just share my screen. And hopefully you will be able to see our slides. There we go. So as Joel said, we are here on behalf of Dumfries and Galloway Council's Youth Work team. Erin, Hannah, Connor and myself are delighted to speak about our journey through lockdown with digital youth work. And despite the challenging circumstances, we managed to develop a creative, innovative and impactful digital youth work programme to support young people across our region.
Sorry, Lauren, have you shared the right, is it meant to be a Zoom cog we're seeing?
Should be, oh.
It might be the wrong tab. I'm saying that I have no clue, frankly.
That should be it now, hopefully.
If you, when you're sharing the screen, I mean, I'm saying this, you're the experts, but have you clicked the right window to share with us? Because it's currently Safari.
It's okay, it was only photos, so we'll just do without. It's totally fine.
Oh, that's really disappointing, but sorry about that.
I can share them from here.
It's cool, it was only photos, it's no biggie. So I'll only do a quick introduction and then I'll hand over to our wonderful volunteers. But back in March, which feels like a lifetime ago, within 24 hours of our face-to-face groups closing, we ran a virtual music night, a group that normally runs in Oasis Youth Centre but was instead running on Zoom, Facebook Live and Instagram. Engaging with young people, taking song requests, enabling sing-alongs and providing a social space for young people to connect in the midst of what was a very difficult situation. Not only did the group provide a social space for young people, but it also became a discussion forum for young people to share what they would like to see happen virtually as part of our digital youth work offer. Young people had the opportunity to shape, design and develop groups, activities and events that would then run over the course of the next 3 months and sign up to help to continue to develop the programme. The following day, after working with young people, the finalised programme was launched and our 7-day-a-week digital support offer to young people was live with social media activities, online groups and virtual one-to-one support. Next slide, please.
We were able to communicate with our youth workers through our chosen social media platforms, including email, text or call. We were constantly in conversation with them about how we could create and run our own activities as part of the online programme. As our young adults did not stop. Instead, we went virtual and we were involved in creating quizzes, social media content and designing the new session plans for our various online groups. We were able to work as a regional team to shape and develop the programme that went on to help hundreds of young people cope with the lockdown. The week after our first virtual music night, we held our first drop-in, which quickly became the highlight of our weeks. Socialising with our friends, catching up with our youth workers. Each day we did a different activity, all of which were designed either in partnership or fully by us.
The drop-ins quickly became a forum for ideas, whereby we were able to develop and innovate projects such as the isolation packs, which went on to see over 4,000 delivered to vulnerable young people in a matter of weeks. We also developed our isolation journals, which is an accredited booklet that gave us something to work on while we were at home and provided a memory book for us to look back on after 2020 was over. Drop-ins continue to provide a safe space for young people to get actively involved in designing digital youth work, and provided a space for young people to develop their skills and continue volunteering, albeit in a different form. Due to the success of the projects developed during lockdown, these now will become a permanent feature of our youth work programme, with resource packs being distributed during the summer holidays as part of our Science at Home group, which runs weekly. Our permanent digital youth work programme also has a digital peer education group, which myself and Connor are part of. And moving forward, we will continue to co-design and deliver an online offer to young people. Not only this, but we will be managing different social media platforms, creating content for our websites and developing resources for youth groups across Dumfries and Galloway to do with the digital literacy.
Another aspect of our digital youth work that changed rapidly was the Regional Youth Council, as members adapted pretty quickly to the new virtual format. At the beginning of lockdown, we held our full youth council on Zoom, where we chatted about regional issues and actions we could and should be taking as a youth council in terms of the response to COVID and how young people have been affected by the pandemic. As part of this meeting, we had an input from the council's Young People's Champion, Adam Wilson, which allowed us to have an influence on Dumfries and Galloway's council's response to the pandemic. When it came to local work, we split into our 4 locality areas using the breakout room feature, which allowed a more focused approach on local issues, allowing us to still continue the work on our local action plans, agreeing what we had to take forward without the ability to work face to face. In June, we held by-elections to allow a few new youth councillors to join, which meant we were able to facilitate online training delivered through a peer education and a virtual voting format for a variety of different roles, ensuring young people across the region were still able to have a say. This also made it possible to progress our 10,000 Voices in Action project, which will see £6,000 of PB funding sent by and for young people later this week. This project has been run fully online, from training to recruitment and to community voting and engagement with partners. The format of our meetings were similar as it would have been pre-COVID, and we're able to continue to volunteer and get involved in youth democracy, which helped a lot of us, providing a sense of normality in our lives.
As we continue to develop our digital youth work offer, young people will continue to be at the heart of both our design and delivery. Through peer education, volunteering opportunities and mentorship programmes, we will endeavour to continue to ensure that digital is able to make a difference to young people's lives, giving them the opportunity to make a difference in their own communities. Although we've already come a long way, we're just at the start of doing digital youth work, and we can't wait to see where it and our young folk take us. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Do you ever sleep? And within 24 hours of youth work, I honestly think that I was just worrying about getting home and what if we were going to run out of toilet paper. Really also, I've noticed in the chat box, someone's brought it up, but love the idea of the isolation pack. I think that's so strong that, frankly, most people could have done with that. And also because I'm at uni, and the halls we have had, there has been obviously awful for the students, particularly because they're in the middle of nowhere at Queen Margaret University, and really think that is something that they would benefit from. So I may well steal that. But thank you, Lauren, Hannah, Connor and Erin. So in our last presentation from Maria, who I think we now have the slides for, she is going to discuss how her personal volunteering went online and some of the work she does. So Maria, take it away.
Thank you. We actually have the slides this time.
Yay.
So in my presentation, I'm going to be talking about youth work on more of like a general scale for me and what happened during the pandemic. So next slide, please. So a little bit about me. When we did go into lockdown, I had just left secondary school, so I had loads of time on my hands. Obviously didn't have exams to study for or anything, so I had so much time for this online volunteering. And then you can see a few things on the screen, like Jules said, that I was involved in, like quite a few projects I was doing. Next slide, please. So when the pandemic struck, personally, everything was cancelled, even though things could have gone online relatively easy. It just got cancelled for quite a few weeks. But then projects started popping up, new projects, like surrounding COVID-19, the effect on young people. But then a lot of the projects I'd already been involved in, such as kind of mental health projects, moved to kind of adapt to the situation. So we looked at the effect of lockdown on mental health, for example, rather than just focusing on mental health generally. And then following on from that, youth work did get moved online. So there were Zoom meetings, and eventually when organizations have had kind of planned things, we managed to have like quite big conferences online, which was quite amazing to see, kind of, especially the background to it, seeing how much work actually gets put into like these massive Zoom meetings. Next slide, please. So obviously during lockdown, I think that there is just a huge need to listen to young people. Obviously, there always is the need to listen to young people, but I think that there is just such a bigger need during lockdown. So obviously, every decision made by government had an effect on young people, whether that be directly or indirectly, although most of the time it was directly, even if you didn't see it. A few of the big ones were schools. Obviously schools got shut at the start of lockdown, and then there was so much uncertainty for a few weeks before things kind of came out about how exams were going to get graded, because they got cancelled as well. And then when the exam results came out, we had to do huge like loads and loads of work on trying to get that turnaround to have the right marks given to everyone. I'm sure everyone saw the mess that was created during that time. And then the uncertainty during transition period. So children moving from nursery to primary school, primary to secondary, and then the situation I was in, which was secondary to university, which, to be honest, we're still living through that mess, and there's still like uncertainty like now, and it's months and months later. And then in the last few months as well, there's been a lot of like young people being blamed for like rising cases and such, particularly students, which obviously is just not true, which just shows like how much we need to get young people's voices across. Next slide, please. So obviously there are like loads of positives of online volunteering. So there is so much more going on. I had a meeting literally every day, I think, at one point. And to be fair, there were like a lot of issues going on with lockdown. So there was a need for like this increase in frequency, because we had more to deal with. I'm from the Western Isles, so I'm from a rural, very rural area. So when there were big meetings, I would have to get the plane down and then stay overnight. But obviously, when everything went online, I didn't have to. Just obviously. On screen, you can see a couple of things that I've done. We have the Scottish Youth Parliament sitting, which we've had 2 or 3 online now. I think 2, I can't remember. And then the panel for international girl human rights as well, which was an amazing opportunity that I got involved in. Next slide, please. Obviously, on the flip side, there are loads of problems with online volunteering as well. A few to mention: access to internet. That's obviously a huge problem where I'm from because of how rural it is. Although a lot of organizations were giving out data packs, so you would get like a few gigabytes of data to join a meeting through 4G, although that doesn't account for when 4G isn't available. Young people's home situations, whether that be like me, I was looking after my brothers while my mum was at work, or kind of much worse situations which were taking place all over the country. It's also much easier for people to drop off the radar, I'd say, during online volunteering, because it's much easier for people just to like not show up to a meeting rather than it is to not show up to an event like in real life. And then I would say it's a bit less accessible, like on some things. Just I would say only people in the youth work sphere get invited to things in the youth work sphere, if that makes any sense. I would just say there's less focus on trying to get new people into the youth work sphere. Next slide, please. And continuing on from the pandemic, I think that more things will continue to be online. Like obviously now we're months into this pandemic and we would still have to be online. But I think once things have gotten a bit better, and even when gatherings are allowed a bit more, I think things will still be online, just for easy access, I suppose. And then also I think there will be less budgets for in real life work, youth work, because it's obviously much cheaper to pay for a Zoom subscription than it is to hire out a venue every week. I don't think that this is the way it should be, obviously. I think realistically, the best way that it could go would be a mix of online and real life. Obviously, that just makes it more accessible to everyone. And then, of course, there's the appreciation of when we are able to see each other after the pandemic. Yeah, so that's my presentation. I hope that was interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and I'm glad we got your slides sorted. That was really interesting. Also, what kind of behind the scenes, I think that is so interesting that you're in halls right now. I'd be very interested to hear about that, and also about the transition on what must have been one of the most turbulent times for anyone. So if we maybe get a chance, very keen to hear your thoughts on that. There are 2 questions to pick up on in the chat box. First one for Katie, that from Kathy on the techniques of zining, if that's the correct term, whether you use digital tools or, I'm not sure, maybe cut them out and then take pictures. I don't know. Katie, could you provide some insight for us?
Sure. So we let the young people do whatever they want. So some of them use digital things, like if they were into digital art already, they might have already had like a Photoshop package or whatever. And then some of them use Word documents and just like stuck together images on Word the way that you normally would. But most of them used materials like paper and glue and pens and paint and like cutting out magazines and sticking them together and stuff. And obviously, like, there's an accessibility issue around like access to those resources. So what we did is like we had a small budget for materials. So if young people needed glue or scissors or magazines or whatever, then they could tell their youth worker, and their youth worker could tell us, and then we could get a hold of those resources for them. So yeah, that's how we did it. And then most people either took a photo on their phone or use an app. Like I have an app called Scannable that just scans images from my phone and then makes it into a document, which keeps it nice and high quality. So if ever you need to scan in pictures that people have done, I'd recommend Scannable because it's free, but that's what we did. Hope that answers the question.
Yep, other apps are available. And then one from Kerry about safeguarding on Zoom drop-ins for Dumfries and Galloway. So it's something that has been tried but can be kind of difficult. So any insight on how you make that safe but accessible would be really helpful.
Yeah, so in terms of our drop-ins, what we are running for both our online and face-to-face services is asking young people to fill out a form on Microsoft Forms. So instead of posting the Zoom link onto social media platforms, we are asking young people to sign up in advance, and it's only the young people who've signed up that have access to that link. So that sort of protects against any unwanted attendees sort of joining in, or Zoom bombing, or any of those sort of issues. But we also, prior to the session beginning, a staff member gets in contact with each young person. It's open to any young person, even those who've maybe not accessed services before. So we get in contact with them prior to the drop-in or the group that they've signed up for, and kind of go through the code of conduct, what they can expect, and arrange sort of support in terms of if they've never used Teams or Zoom or Facebook or the platform that the group's been hosted on, so that they're then comfortable with that before they come online. And the other feature that's been enabled is all of our calls have a waiting room, and before any young person joins the session, we just ask them for their name that they signed up with, and that lets us check off that they're on the list that we sent through the link to.
Does that answer your question, Kerry? I'll maybe see a message from you. Yes, fabulous. Has anyone else got any questions? Feel free to raise your hand if you can do it on this. I'm slightly knocked down with Zoom, which is an irony. Or feel free to unmute yourself and make yourself known.
I'll come in with a question while other people are thinking. So Hilary Phillips from YouthLink Scotland. I'm really interested, Dumfries and Galloway, in how you took your offer online within 24 hours. I think that is an absolutely astonishing thing to have done. So just be interested to hear a little bit more around that.
Yeah, it was definitely a stressful 24 hours, for sure, for both staff and young people. It was a Wednesday afternoon, I think, that we, just before the First Minister had made her announcement on lockdown, we took the decision to close all face-to-face services, which was the first time that had ever happened in D&G. And that day we assembled a team of 10 youth workers from across the region whose focus for the next four or 5 months would be solely to run youth work services fully online. As we were part of the local authority, other members of our team, because we're quite a big team, were taken to different parts of the council to support with social work. Some went over to children and families. So our sort of core team of 10 were responsible for keeping in contact with all the young folk that we worked with. So we spent the first sort of 3 or 4 hours contacting people, contacting young people to make sure that they were aware of what was going on. And it was through discussions with young folk that we developed the idea to take music night online. And we then on the Thursday, spent the whole day working on sort of safeguarding, making sure that we had approval to run Zoom virtually, to take things on Facebook Live, and work with young people about what format would suit them best, how they wanted to sign up, and it kind of just snowballed from there.
I think Hilary's nodding. I have two questions if no one else does, but please feel free. This is absolutely a collaborative event to ask a question now.
There's a question in the chat from Kathy as well.
There is, I think, one from Izzy ages ago, which I didn't pick up on as my role and share for Zoe, about how you found the youth groups. And I know that can be quite difficult as well, because there's not a database type thing. Well,
yeah,
in that sense.
Yeah, good question. So I guess there's kind of three strands. There was youth groups that we were already in contact with, and then because we were doing it through a conference that had a wide reach in youth groups it was connected to, we had kind of video content as part of the main sessions on that, so that then engaged those. And then further than that, we used a lot of social media, so we did, especially Instagram stories. We actually found that they were most had biggest impact in people engaging with them, opposed to Facebook and Instagram posts. So did kind of different kind of videos of people cycling and different videos of telling stories of our clients, and then kind of shared links for people to sign up. So I think it kind of became a word of mouth thing, and then as the young people started taking on the challenge themselves, they were sharing links for people to get involved, and it kind of spiraled from there. So the main ways that we got in touch with these groups.
Thank you, Zoe. Kathy's question to all panelists: will digital youth work replace face-to-face work once we can see each other again? And what are your thoughts on how this will change and develop in the future? So kind of finishing on asking a big question. Does anyone want to take that first?
I'm happy to go. I don't think that online youth work could ever replace face-to-face, no matter how much you try. But I think that there will be a lot more online youth work, likely blended youth work, I suppose you could call it.
Yeah, I would agree in that you can't replace face-to-face contact in the way that you can work coffee to one another and share ideas, and but I wonder if this time has realized how flexible the internet can make us, and actually reduced our travel across Scotland. Actually, can I log in on Zoom and speak at a youth group in the Shetland Islands, opposed to traveling? Or could I get one of my colleagues in India to do kind of a guest speaker appearance at something? And so I think there'll be increased flexibility that we take forwards, but you can't replace being face to face, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's things we can do in person, like playing games or talking in shoulder partners. I really miss that, having that little casual chat with the person beside you, as well as the big conversation happening in the room, that isn't replaceable online. But then there are definitely things like the research the Advisory Council were doing over the summer, where we were able to engage with a much more diverse group of young people in general, but also a more geographically diverse group of young people by doing it online. And I think for things like that, like consultation and stuff, it could definitely work really well.
Yeah, just to echo what everyone else has said already, one of the sort of highlights from our returning to face-to-face work was using tablets for young people who were potentially shielding or just not feeling as confident yet to come out of the house, actually incorporating young people using the tablets to play games both in person and online, which was really, really cool. And I think that's something that we are gonna take forward as both like having blended groups where there's online and face-to-face, digital only and face-to-face only. But yeah, as much as I love digital, I don't think it'll ever replace face-to-face work.
Thank you, everyone. And that is us just with 3 minutes left of this session, which finishing on time would be an absolute first for me. And there's a number of people in here who have been on events with me in the past and can second that. What's going to be the kind of takeaway from this session? Well, there is going to be a blog post put up on let me just check, on digitalyouthwork.scot, which is, I actually do know it's a digital hub kind of in partnership with different organisations, which is attempting to be a go-to digital hotspot for resources and best practice and interesting approaches, which some of our guests today are using and kind of more widely in Scotland. So definitely check that out. This is only the 3rd day of IWell Week. There's 2 left. So if you're not sick of us yet, then please check out what other events we have later in the week. Thank you, Jane, for popping that link in the chat box there if anyone wants to have a look. Please do check out what we have also on social media at #IWell. Please follow the Scottish Twitter if you're interested in anything else which is coming out. But from me, if any of the speakers would like to take the final word, please do. But from me, that is completely us, and I hope you have a fantastic week and hang in there, everyone, during a time of total turbulence.